Hello, and welcome to the Thesis and Dissertation Preparation Workshop. I am Scott Kirkby, an Associate Dean with the School of Graduate Studies. To get started, I encourage you to read your graduate catalog. It will outline the specific process that you need to follow from start to finish in order to complete your thesis or dissertation. Many of the specifics are program dependent, so give your catalog a look over. Talk to your research advisor, your committee chair, and also talk to your graduate coordinator. They will know the specifics for your program. So to start, you need to find a topic and choose a committee. How to brainstorm a topic? Well, what really interests you about your discipline? Of all the wide range of areas that your discipline covers, what specifically attracted you to it? Discuss this topic with a faculty member who has similar interests. What ideas do they have about your interests? What does the scholarship, the currently existing literature, say about your topic? Remember, a thesis or dissertation is a novel piece of scholarly work, novel being a key part. You have to find something new that you can add to the body of literature as part of your thesis. The first step is often selecting a chair, especially in the sciences, where the kind of project that you can undergo depends on who your research advisor, who will be your committee chair, and the research that interests them so that they can provide the facilities and equipment that you will need to do that. In other areas like the arts and humanities, this is not quite so closely tied, but still you'll want to find somebody who's diligent, who's interested in the topic area that you're interested in, and with whom you work well. Not every possible faculty member is an ideal research advisor or committee chair for everyone. Find somebody who's a good fit for you. You'll want similar characteristics from the rest of your committee, but I would encourage you to discuss the possible members with your committee chair before inviting them. And please keep in mind, your committee chair and your members are volunteers for this. It is mutually agreed upon plan that they will serve on your committee. So make sure you know their expectations, what they're willing to do as committee members, what feedback they'll provide when they will provide it, and what they expect from you. It's best to work out the details now to avoid any surprises later. When your committee has been identified, work with your graduate program coordinator and your graduate program specialist to fill out the necessary forms. As always, the paperwork for the bureaucracy must be completed. This will require a committee form, which formalizes your committee. This is so that we know who is going to be on your committee, so that we can then make sure they have the proper credentials to be on a graduate advisory committee or a thesis and dissertation defense committee. You also need a candidacy form, which signifies to the graduate school that you've moved on to the candidacy portion of your program. You will similarly need a program of study, which presents the plan of courses that will meet your degree requirements. You must meet all the degree requirements for your courses in order to be able to graduate. The plan of study gives us advanced warning of what to expect, so there are no unfortunate last-minute surprises in the rush to try and graduate at the end. You wouldn't want to have to stick around for an extra semester or an extra year picking up a course you missed that you easily could have taken if you'd remembered earlier. Turn in these forms by the end of your first year, but keep dated and stamped copies just in case the originals go astray. You can make changes to any of these forms before you register for your thesis and dissertation hours. If you have a committee member who leaves the university or is no longer able to serve for whatever reason, you can change the membership of your committee by submitting the appropriate change of committee form. Many programs require a prospectus to be approved before you begin your thesis or dissertation work. The specifics of this prospectus will depend on your discipline, so talk to your thesis advisor. If your discipline requires a prospectus, construct a document that your committee can approve. They will want to see very specific things in these documents, so make sure you provide your committee with what they need. Usually it will be an iterative process where they'll require changes and make these changes as necessary. Meet regularly with your committee and your thesis chair to keep them posted regarding your progress and also to keep you honest about making progress. Remember, the thesis and dissertation component of graduate school takes as long as it takes to get finished. It's an easy way to say this, but it's also an easy thing to forget. It's hard to rush it at the end and be successful. So, keep yourself honest about making progress so that you don't lose track. Often approvals are required. For example, if you use human subject research, or if there are vertebrate or other animals involved, controlled substances like drugs, or biological materials that may be hazardous, chemical hazardous, ionizing radiation, and so forth. Each of these potential hazardous or sensitive areas will require approvals to be able to use in the research for your thesis and dissertation, and has an appropriate approvals body and supervisory body at the university. For human subject research, this is the Institutional Review Board, known by its initials, the IRB. How do you know if you need IRB approval? The IRB will tell you. Take a look at their website. They have lots of information there on human subject research and which kinds of research requires IRB approval and which kinds of research requires an exemption from the IRB. Keep in mind that if your research involves human subjects, only the IRB is empowered to make the decision as to whether you need IRB approval or are exempt. Your research advisor, and especially yourself, are not allowed to make that decision. This is very important because human subject research is very highly regulated. Do not collect any data in any way, shape, or form involving human subjects without either IRB approval or an IRB exemption in place. These steps must be necessarily completed. You cannot publish anything in human subject research without IRB approval. Publication also includes the publishing of your thesis and dissertation, not just in peer-reviewed journal articles or at conference proceedings. Many programs regard failure to obtain IRB approval before starting your research not just as useless because it can't be published, but also academic misconduct, which may result in your removal from the program if you have done this. Do not do it. Get all of the appropriate approvals that you need before starting your research. Once your research is completed, you'll be in the writing phase. It varies from program to program. Several programs have separate research classes that you take while you're doing the research, and then a final thesis or dissertation class. Others combine them all into a single thesis and/or dissertation set of courses. Once you have registered for thesis or dissertation, however, the university has a requirement that you be continuously enrolled until you are completed. This means that you must enroll for at least 1 credit per semester for fall, spring, and summer from the start of this first thesis or dissertation course until you are completed and ready to graduate. Research, especially the writing component, can be highly personal in what works best for you. Ultimately, only you can figure out what that is. Because I have many projects that demand a piece of my time every day, I benefit by working on projects in little chunks. That way I can chip away at several of them every day. So the 1-hour rule per, or sort of. This is not optimum for everyone. This can be quite distracting, can waste a lot of time in switching between ideas. So if you find you need a bigger block of time, then you need to schedule a bigger block of time. And this scheduling is important. Many of us regard your thesis and dissertation manuscript preparation as the most important thing you will do in graduate school. If it's the most important thing you'll do in graduate school, schedule it just like you would going to class or other parts of your academic commitment. That is, schedule appointments with your thesis. It'll help you block off the time and it'll help you keep the appointments. Remember, it's easy to say I'll get to it later, and get to it later can be weeks, months later, and it's not done until it's done. You can't run out the clock on your thesis and dissertation. So, I am a computational chemist. That gives me a bit of a different perspective on things than perhaps someone in business or arts and humanities. So several of my comments come from that perspective. Thanks to the digital commons, the average thesis and dissertation at ETSU is now read by over 10 people. This is not like the old days where the thesis went into a dusty set of archives never to be seen again. So who reads these theses? It's not just the next student working on a similar project for your research advisor. It's also not just your friends and family. Often it includes potential employers and admissions committees in professional school or doctoral programs if you're in a master's program currently. So take pride in what you write and how you construct your sentences. People will judge your work that you've done for your thesis on how the final manuscript reads and looks. So aim for an active voice, use action verbs to enhance the eloquence and clarity of your prose. Being obscure may sound better to you, but it won't necessarily sound better to anyone else. Be clear if it's possible. The literature review section is a summary of the current state of the research in your topic. Connect it to your contribution. Make this section matter. It's not just a bit of trivia to check off as you move to the next section. Often those potential employers will look at your abstract and the first few paragraphs of your chapter 1 to see whether it's worth the time and effort to examine it further. If you don't make a good initial first impression, the work looks sloppy or poorly done, they'll assume the rest of it is the same way. And you don't want a potential employer thinking that you do sloppy work and don't care about its quality. For your literature review, go to the original sources. Do not rely on encyclopedias, online sources like Wikipedia. There are lots of disputes as to the quality of these sources. The unfortunate thing is that they all contain potential errors, including even the best of the historic encyclopedias. Go to the original sources if they're available. Similarly, avoid textbooks if at all possible. So, I wish we did not have to deal with it, but it is a topic that does need to be covered. There are problems with the writing, including academic misconduct problems. Things like fabrication, plagiarism, or other practices that deviate from those commonly accepted for proposing and conducting and reporting research are academic misconduct. You can and may be dismissed from a program if you are guilty of this kind of misconduct. Notice, though, that this does not include error or honest differences in interpretation or judgment. Errors need to be honest errors, of course, but errors are always possible in research. And differences of opinion are just that, differences of opinion. Just because someone disagrees with your view or you disagree with their view does not necessarily make one right and the other one wrong. However, if it is misconduct, if it is dishonest, the dishonest reporting of results, or fabricating results, or changing data, or negligence in collecting your data. Remember, making mistakes, even though you're trying your best and doing things properly, is different from not caring enough to bother to do it properly. If you, in your analysis or in your reporting, are selective, you omit anything that disagrees with your pre-established conclusions. Remember, conclusions should be the end, not the beginning. So you must be honest. Plagiarism especially is the using or taking credit for the work or ideas of others without proper acknowledgement or permission. There is usually an exception for common knowledge. You don't need to reference 2 + 2 = 4. But what constitutes common knowledge is not in uniform agreement. If you're using the ideas of others, it's always a good idea to cite it. Nobody ever gets in trouble for citing common knowledge. They do get in trouble when it's not common knowledge and they thought it was. Remember, common knowledge is common, not just within your program-specific expertise. Other examples of difficulty are abuse of confidentiality or the legitimate expectation of academic misconduct. Accurately present your findings and their sources. Again, nobody gets in trouble for being extra generous with references. Take good notes to document the sources of your findings. Also, use good work practices. Cutting and pasting a paragraph from one document into your manuscript with the idea that you will revise it later so it's a paraphrase rather than a direct quote is a dangerous practice, because it's very easy to forget to do that in the total workload, and then you're in serious trouble. You can also use Turnitin, which is our plagiarism analysis software. Contact your research advisor or your committee chair and ask to be added to a class with a Dropbox. If you're taking a thesis and dissertation or readings and research class, this is often the easiest choice. Then submit your thesis through the Dropbox with the plagiarism detection enabled. This will flag areas that have been previously published that are in the Turnitin database, so you can make sure that they're properly referenced and sourced. It is a good idea until your final version of the manuscript that you're submitting for the EDT system to leave off the addition of the manuscript to the Turnitin database. Otherwise, your second and subsequent trips through the Turnitin system will simply flag yourself, and this will make checking that you have the right information much more difficult. If you're having difficulty making progress, the Center for Academic Achievement and the SHARED can assist you with providing some writing support. They provide assistance with style and grammar. They are not an editing service. So they can help you get the English correct. They won't write your thesis or technically edit your thesis for you. Financially, the graduate school offers thesis and dissertation scholarships. These are final semester scholarships that will cover up to 6 credits of thesis, dissertation, or readings and research. This can be very helpful for your last semester, and it is a 1-semester non-renewable scholarship. If, for example, you have a GA ending and you need coverage for that final summer or that final next semester, the continuous enrollment requirement makes that necessary. If you need time, you must enroll. You can't simply skip. So, if you're having difficulty or just want some additional dedicated time to focus on your manuscript, you can also look at the Thesis and Dissertation Bootcamp. This is an extra cost. However, it's dedicated time in the library. There's food provided during the meal times. Also, there are workshops available from the library staff. And importantly, it's free of distractions, dedicated time to work on your thesis. Details of the bootcamp are available on the ETD website. So, once you get close to the end, what do you need to do? Well, there's always paperwork. You need to file an intent to graduate form with the graduate school before the deadline for that semester. If you miss and need another semester, keep in mind you have to file a new intent for each new semester. You also need to schedule an oral defense. Why do you need to notify us if it only involves your committee and the public? Because the graduate school needs to find an outside observer. So your oral defense notification form also requires a copy of the abstract. This allows us to contact an outside observer and get them scheduled in time for your defense. You also need to distribute copies of your manuscript to all of your committee members. How long in advance of your defense is up to your members. I personally take a week. I do not find acceptable to walk into a defense being handed a copy of a manuscript at the last minute. It does not give me a time to evaluate the manuscript and to prepare properly for the defense. What I do for my students who can't meet my 1-week commitment is require them to reschedule. Otherwise, I will vote no, because I will not pass a manuscript that I haven't had a chance to properly evaluate. Many faculty share this attitude, even if they're not as rigid, so make sure you get the copies of a completed manuscript to them when they require it. The actual defense is program or departmental specific, and your coordinator and your research advisor can explain this process to you. The outside observer will submit an oral defense report form. What this form stipulates is that all the members of your committee were there and that the rules for the defense for your program were followed. This is a protection for both the student and the faculty to make sure that what the student went through, the actual defense process in itself, is within specification. So, once you've defended, the chair and the committee need to approve before submitting your thesis and dissertation to the graduate school. So, in a typical defense, there are 3 possible outcomes. They don't have specific wordings, but they usually fall into pass, pass with corrections, and fail. Pass and fail are fairly self-explanatory. Pass with corrections is that the committee is requiring you to make changes to the manuscript. Because your committee must approve the manuscript before it can be submitted, these changes are rarely optional, though it is not uncommon for one member of the committee requiring a change and another member of the committee requiring that it not be changed. So these need to be worked out in consultation with your committee and your committee chair. Once you have it in final form and your chair and committee approve it, then you submit to the electronic thesis and dissertation system for review. Why do we use an electronic system? It improves access. It allows us to directly make use of digital commons, which will give your research much higher visibility than sitting in the dusty bowels of a library. So, it also allows for ready use of highly visual components. It's a PDF file so that tables, pictures, etc. are readily scalable. You can also use non-static media like audio and video that can be embedded. If this is an advantage to you, take and use it to that advantage, but get early support. Just because you're slow doesn't mean you get to miss the deadlines and still graduate on time. So the approval process. Your manuscript represents a blending of discipline-specific and graduate school formatting guidelines. The goal is to create a stable, sophisticated, comprehensive word processing file. Make sure to obtain permission for use of copyrighted material. Anything that's directly copied, such as images, tables, figures, etc., require permission. Modified materials also need to be cited as adapted. It is not acceptable to not have permission for copyrighted material. Many major academic publishers have a request form on their website, and many will process it overnight. So it's easy to get permission. However, there are many small publishers out there, and many small publishers have gone out of business, been merged, sold off, so it's no longer clear who is the correct copyright holder for older materials or material from small publishers. That does not remove the requirement that you obtain permission. It can take possibly several months to track down and obtain the permission from a small publisher that's been sold or merged or gone out of business several times in the last several decades. But this requirement is still necessary. It cannot be published in your manuscript without permission. It would be academic misconduct to allow it to be published otherwise. So as far as the formatting goes, follow the guidelines in the thesis and dissertation guide available on the ETD website for your front and end matter. You can choose between the standard format or, if your program permits, the alternate format for your thesis and dissertation. The standard format follows the guidelines that your program has set for your discipline. So, for example, the American Chemical Society, the Chicago Manual of Style, the American Philosophical Association, Modern Languages Association, etc. Each program has selected a specific style that they require. Remember, if your program uses the APA, the style now requires the use of the unique document online identifier code for all electronic citations. So it's often useful to use another thesis or dissertation as a supplemental guide, but remember it's a guide, not something to copy. Finally, your thesis and dissertation should be a single file made up of several chapters. The final published version will be a single PDF. If your program allows the alternate format, your usage of this format must be approved by the program. The beginning and ending are the same as the standard format in manuscript style. The middle chapters, however, are formatted in one of a selected and accepted journal from your discipline. They are often the papers that have been published or will soon be published from your thesis or dissertation work. There are details of this in the ETD guide. Make use of it. Again, the alternate format is only available if your program allows it and has approved your specific use. So in summing up, the most important thing to remember is you can do this. Everyone who has graduated from a thesis and dissertation based graduate program has completed their thesis and dissertation. It is often a point in every student's career where it feels like they're too far in to be new, not far enough along to be close to the end, and it just seems a long way to go. But remember, you can do this. And most importantly, remember, the only good thesis, the only good dissertation is a completed one. It takes as long as it takes, so put a lot of your effort in on a regular basis so that you can get it done in a reasonable time frame. In closing up, I'd like to provide the contact information again. Again, I'm Scott Kirkby, an Associate Dean with the Graduate School. The Thesis and Dissertation Coordinator is Ms. Emily Redd. The Dean of the Graduate School is Dr. Sharon McGee, and our websites are at etsu.edu/GRADSTUD, and the EDT website leads off the graduate school at /ETD. And thank you very much for your time.